Hello everybody, this is Tom in Los Angeles. I hope you're having a good weekend, and I'm here today to do a fun tag. I have to thank Dario at Motley Reads for tagging me for this fun tag. It's called the Hindsight is 2020 reader tag. And Dario's channel, Motley Reads, is one channel that is particularly interesting to me because I share with Dario the fact that I left my original country, and we both read books both in our native language and in English. For me, Italian, and for him, local I believe is Bosnian or Yugoslavian language. And so thanks, Dario. This should be a pretty quick video. And it's interesting, I hope it's going to be interesting also to hear my history as a reader, as an Italian reader, because I believe it's pretty typical of many Italian readers that growing up go through certain steps that are almost automatic because of how the Italian publishing environment works. So question number one. What were you like as an early and learning reader? So here is, I have to mention Topolino, which is a kids publication. Topolino in Italian means Mickey Mouse. It's today owned by the Walt Disney Company, but it's a fairly old publication by publisher Mondadori in Italy, I think still from the 30s or 40s. They started to publish weekly magazines with Walt Disney characters based stories. But these stories were created by Italian artists and Italian writers. And Topolino became extremely popular in Italy. Today, so many kids in Italy still read it. And I believe it's been sold all around Europe, and it's been successful all around Europe as an Italian publication based on Walt Disney characters. So when I was 6, 7, 8, that's pretty much all I was reading, like many Italian readers. That helped me fall in love with the medium of comic books and sequential art. Of course, as I grew up, I started reading books and proper books. Like I remember one of the first ones was The Wizard of Oz. I must have been 7 or 8, and The Wizard of Oz made a huge impact on my imagination. It's incredible sometimes to try and remember the power that your imagination had when you were a child. You don't have it anymore, but you remember the power of that, and it's just pleasant to entertain the memory of it. And then, of course, around I think 10 or 11, I started reading, let's call it adult books, and going on. Question number 2: what book or book series really got you excited about reading as a kid? Okay, so this is a perfect segue to the first question. I'm thinking particularly about science fiction. So as a kid, I'm talking about 11 or 12, and this is also where the Italian publishing industry comes into play. I fell in love with a series of Italian science fiction books called Urania. Urania is also published by Mondadori, and it's also still being published today. It's I'm going to show a picture of one issue. It's a series that I believe started in the 50s, and they published a few Italian science fiction authors, but the vast majority were American, English, all the classic golden era to start with science fiction authors. And my grandpa had a huge collection of this Urania. That was really the way that the Italian public had the chance to know and find out about science fiction, the real American and let's say Anglophone world science fiction through Urania. So I really think that Mondadori as a publisher had another wonderful idea in channeling all these incredible books. And I think they were published monthly, and they probably still are. So this was the way that I got hooked. And to answer the question a little bit more directly, science fiction is what really got me excited about reading. I had never found anything as exciting in my reads before. In particular, I have to quote books by Arthur C. Clarke, Asimov as well, but nobody hit me as strongly and powerfully as Arthur C. Clarke. Maybe because I consider Clarke to be a very rare, very, very rare genius that could combine an engineer, scientific mind, very strong scientific mind, with something of a poet's heart, with something of a real artist and poetic heart. It's a mix of skills that really resonates with me. And so when I read Childhood's End, when I read 2001, when I read all of his short stories, it was literally like finding a relative. And to the point, and this is a little short story anecdote that I can quote about Arthur Clarke. To the point that later on in my life, when I was living in London, I tried to get in contact, to get in touch with Clarke. I'm talking about 2006 or 7, and through the internet, because he was living in Sri Lanka. He had been living there for decades at that time. And I was lucky enough to be able to get in touch with his personal assistant, with his personal secretary, who talked to Clarke and got me somehow the permission from Clarke to visit him in Sri Lanka and see him for 1 hour. So I was extremely excited. Unfortunately, that trip didn't happen. I was already looking into flight tickets, etc. But unfortunately, his health deteriorated. He was already very old back then. And I believe the same year, he unfortunately passed away. But my love for his writings and his work is huge, huge, huge love. So sorry for the long-winded anecdote, but the answer to that question is science fiction, and in particular Arthur Clarke, got me really excited about reading. There's another element of the Italian publishing world, or another publisher that I'd like to quote, which is Bonelli. It's maybe today the largest and the most important comic book publisher in Italy. Since the 90s, or maybe even earlier, they started, in fact, Dario mentioned a couple of incredibly good comic books, black and white comic books from the 80s and the 90s, Zagor, etc. They later evolved into a series of different characters like Dylan Dog, Martin Myster, Nathan Never, and a huge, huge portion of Italian teenagers and adults read them and still today read them. So it's a big deal in Italy. I think within Europe, the comic book industry is extremely strong in France, very, very strong in Belgium as well, and very strong in Italy. There is an annual conference in Lucca, in Tuscany, that is huge at European level. I never went there, but it's something that in the future I'd love to do. So, has there been a person, question number 3, has there been a person in your life, real or fictional, who inspired you to be a reader? The answer is probably my grandpa, who had this huge collection of Urania science fiction books. And from there, I had the privilege of being a foreign exchange student in the US in 92, 93. So during that year, as an Italian kid who could only speak Italian and German because that's what I learned back home, I learned English by osmosis, which is generally one of the best ways to learn a language when you're young, at least. And I still remember vividly my very first book that I read in English, and that was The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. I was over the moon with joy and happiness because I was able to read in English, and so I had this completely new world that opened up to me. And since then, I've tried to keep a 50-50 proportion in what I read, although, I don't know, maybe because it's not as easy for me to get new Italian titles because they take forever to ship. I find myself reading a bit more in English in these days. So I have to thank my grandpa for initiating me there. Question number 4. At what point did you begin to identify as a reader? Yeah, probably around 14, 15 years old. I was very much into music. As a teenager, I played the piano a lot. In fact, playing the piano was probably, as a pianist, I think back then I was identifying myself more than as a reader, but I was reading a lot as well. And that's how I also made a little bit of money during my university in Italy. But later on, and I think for all my life, I had never had a doubt that there was a magnetic force in books for me, for the pleasure of it. I've heard the same said by, I think, all the people who made this tag, who made a video about this tag, the way that you feel like it's your world, it's your almost family with these authors, and being able to inhabit other people's lives and minds and hearts. By the way, this is a great tag because it really allows you to express your passion. And I've seen some of the videos by Dario, Mark, and Steve. You can really see your guys' passion, and it's lovely. It's great. Question number 5, how has being a reader shaped your life and your worldview? Very good question. Like Dario said, there is a huge element of mind expansion that comes with reading a lot. Your mind, your world, your life, your existence become larger, broader, and to the point that you need it. You need that type of space, and that also orients your preferences in terms of people, of course. But I think in terms of this good question, there is something that happened to me because I am a reader, which has to do with my spiritual life or religious life. In my early 30s, it was only because I'm a reader that I found a new light and a new joy and then a new meaning in Christianity and in the Catholic writings, especially of Joseph Ratzinger. That's been my experience. He was able, in fact, especially his early writings, like his books on science and faith, the relationship between science and faith, his introduction to Christianity, which is called an introduction, but it just made my head explode because it's really pretty tough. And being a reader, I know that that's the best way for me to understand things. That's the best way for me to learn things. Some other people learn by speaking, by listening, by doing things. It was through the words on his books, of Joseph Ratzinger in particular, that another new door, very important one, opened up for me. And again, I have to thank this nature of being a reader for that. And finally, I'm going to tag somebody. It's I don't know who actually did it, because like other people said, this is really a tag that I would love to see the video from anyone. So I'll think about it a second, and then I'll put the names that I'm tagging down in the description. Anyway, thanks Dario again for tagging me. I hope this was fairly interesting, and we'll speak soon.